participating in this Planning Commission meeting by speakerphone. In accordance with the Brown Act, each teleconference location has been identified in the notice and the agenda for this meeting. Please bear with me for a while we go through special procedures required by the Brown Act. I would now like to request Commissioner Alderetti and Commissioner Mendoza to respond to the following questions. Commissioner Mendoza, Commissioner Alderetti, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end up until now?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Is the agenda posted at the location where you are at?
Yes. Yes.
Is your location reasonably accessible to the public such that any member of the public can participate in the teleconference from your location if he or she wishes to do so?
Yes. Yes.
Is there any member of the public there with you who would like to participate in the public comments portion of this meeting or otherwise address any agenda item of this meeting?
No. No.
Okay. I would like to now ask that any member of the Planning Commission speak up for this time if such commissioner has not been able to clarify. Any Commissioner Alderetti or Commissioner Mendoza? Hearing, everybody heard? Okay. Hearing no comment, the record should reflect that all commissioners present have indicated that they were able to hear Commissioner Alderetti and Commissioner Mendoza clearly. I would like to next request that any commissioner, including Commissioner Alderetti and Commissioner Mendoza, speak up at this time if such commissioner has any reason to believe, based on voice recognition or otherwise, that the person representing himself to the Commissioner Alderetti and Mendoza is not truly so. Hearing no comment, the record should reflect that no commissioner has expressed doubt that Commissioner Alderetti and Commissioner Mendoza are participating by teleconference along with the planning commissioners present here. I would now like to advise the Planning Commissioner and Secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Commissioner Becerra?
Here.
Commissioner Verino?
Here.
Commissioner Alderetti?
Here.
Vice Chair Contreras-Leo? Chair McLaughlin?
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Here.
Commissioner Nguyen?
Here.
Chair, you have quorum, and for the record, Vice Chair Contreras-Leo will not be attending tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Does anyone in the public have public comments on non-agendized items? You may fill out a request to speak. You have 3 minutes, unless otherwise extended by the chairperson. Oh, my bad. Yes, we will do that. I'm sorry. Would you all stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, to the republic which is one nation,
Okay. Sound like an echo in the room. Okay. All right, so we'll open the non-agendized public comments at this time. The first one I have is Mike Tardif.
Good evening, Commissioners. I would like to speak to you about concerns that I have regarding a vote you took at your meeting of March 12th this year. The vote was concerning a request for a relatively minor change to a conditional use permit for Citrus Springs Charter School on Grand Avenue. Citrus Springs was requesting to upgrade their current CUP to cover grades 7 to 12. Their current CUP covers grades K to 6. Unfortunately, it was very obvious from the tone of your discussion and debate that 4 of your members favor traditional public schools over charter schools. I won't single those 4 out at this time. I've had online discussions with 2 of the commission members on this issue. I have not changed my mind concerning how out of bounds this commission acted in denying Citrus Charter a minor CUP modification. You could have asked the applicant to produce a traffic study to verify the safety of their planned operations, but you instead rather chose to deny the application outright. I could go into detail on every point you attempted to make to disfavor this charter school, which has been operating in Santa Ana for 4 years with no issues. I don't think that is necessary at this point. I'll just say your bias against charter schools is available for all to witness on the audio and video recording, which is available on the city website. It is a shame that in this case, some of you let your political voices influence your duty to come to a decision which takes into consideration the welfare of the entire community. I will be speaking in favor of the Citrus Springs appeal at the City Council meeting tomorrow evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Sue McDonald.
My name is Sue McDonald, and I live in the Park Santiago neighborhood. I've lived on French Street in Park Santiago all of my life. It is such a wonderful neighborhood that when I got married, I bought a house on the same street as my family home, and so did my sister. My family home is a 1927 Tudor built by Allison Honer. Not only did Honer build the home, but he lived in it for several years until my grandparents, the Simpsons, bought the house in the early 1930s. Our neighborhood is so special because of history like this. I know everyone on my street and many people surrounding French Street. One neighbor, Blair O'Callahan, who lives on the corner, beautifully remodeled a Tudor home and received historic designation from the Santa Ana Historic Preservation Commission last month. Great neighbors are important, and the history of the homes and the people who live in them should continue. This is what makes these neighborhoods so precious. The City of Santa Ana's commissions and councils have always recognized how special the old North Santa Ana neighborhoods are. They have worked so hard to preserve these keepsake neighborhoods, evident by past efforts to preserve them. When the City of Orange was developing the area around Memory Lane and Parker, Santa Ana chose to close the Santiago Bridge to keep the business traffic from coming through our neighborhood. Then when the Santa Ana Freeway was being slated to be widened and Main Street had to be closed down, the city chose to close Edgewood for over a year at the request of the residents to help stop excessive traffic. Also, because of the construction on the freeway, the underpass traveling under the freeway and into our neighborhood was being removed and replaced with an overpass. Even though the side supports for the overpass were almost complete, the project was stopped when the neighbors in the city realized that this was not a positive thing for the neighborhood and the city. Another example is when the Mother's Market shopping center near us was being developed, the city turned down several junk projects waiting for just the right one to fit the area. I think this is why I'm confused about the project on 2525 Main Street. This seems like a project that someone was just looking to plop down somewhere, and they picked this corner because it had open land. Maybe it's not a junk project, but it's something that could be built anywhere. There's nothing special about it. In fact, I think all the apartments proposed for Main Place Mall seem to be a better fit. Why one more set of apartments so similar have to be put where it will cause negative effects on a neighborhood that the city has worked so hard to preserve, I don't understand. I ask this Planning Commission and the City Council to continue the legacy of past commissioners and council members and see through their eyes that these neighborhoods should be preserved because they cannot be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Janelle Johnson.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Janelle Johnson. I live in Park Santiago as well. My husband and I bought a home there over 20 years ago, and we worked very hard fixing our home up, and have known many of our neighbors, have had backyard barbecues with them, and our neighborhood is special to us. We already see encroachment of parking into our neighborhood from apartments on Santa Clara between Lincoln and Grand. And there's little side streets that are packed because there was not enough parking allocated to those developments. This development proposed at 2525 North Main Street cannot positively impact our neighborhood in any shape or form. It will only encroach upon parking because there's not enough parking specified for the number of units, especially at the rates that they are projected to be rented at. The project over at Main Place Mall is a much, much better use of apartment dwellings than 2525 Main Street. There are two proposed developments of apartments in Orange, right off of Parker, and Town and Country that are being scheduled to go in, along with the two apartment buildings that were just built, one in Santa Ana and one in Orange, between Memory Lane and Town and Country. Then there's another one being scheduled at the bank building on the corner of Memory Lane and Main Street. That's a lot of apartments. Our neighborhood already has a significant amount of traffic going through it for people cutting between Grand and going down Lincoln to 17th, trying to cut around. And I respectfully request that you very, very carefully consider this development before approving it, because it is not a positive impact for Santa Ana or the traffic on Main Street, which is already bottlenecked. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Would anybody else like to speak at this point in time on a non-agendized item? Hearing none, public hearing is closed. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve the absence of Cynthia Contreras-Leo at this point in time?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait, roll call.
Aye.
Roll call. Sorry.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Becerra.
Aye.
You're good, Patrice.
Commissioner Becerra.
Aye.
Commissioner Verino.
Aye.
Commissioner Alderetti.
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Nguyen.
Here.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Business calendar. We will now move on to the business calendar. Please be advised that the action of the Planning Commission shall become effective on the day following the first regularly scheduled City Council meeting after a 10-day appeal period, unless if allowed by the Santa Ana Municipal Code. An appeal to the City Council is filed with the Clerk of the Council, and a copy is sent to the Planning Department within 10 days of the Commission's actions, or unless set for public hearing by the City Council. An appeal from a decision or requirement of the Planning Commissioner may be made by any interested party, individual, or group. This is time and place to consider item number 1, site plan review number 2017-09, and density bonus agreement application number 2017-02 to allow construction of an affordable rental residential community within the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay District at 2110, 2114, and 2020 East First Street. Ali? Let me make one comment here before. Does any of the commissioners have anything to disclose at this time with regards to this item? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I previously met with the applicant and the applicant's representative and exchanged a couple text messages, but nothing of which provided anything beyond what's in our staff report.
Okay, Lynette?
I had a teleconference on Thursday, May 31st with Pam Cepeda and Michael Messi.
Okay.
I did have the telephone conversation with the applicant representative this morning and expressed my concern regarding the parking of the project.
Beatrice?
Yes, I had a meeting with the applicant as well last Friday, and we discussed the project.
Eric?
Yes, I had two text messages with Pam Cepetto, did not meet with her, and completed an ex-party application form and submitted it before the meeting.
Okay, and I had several text messages from Pam Cepetto, and I also met with Pam and Michael today, this morning. Okay, Ali.
Thank you, Chairman McLaughlin. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Up for review and discussion tonight is the First Point Mixed-Use Community Site Plan Review number 2017-9 and Density Bonus Agreement application number 2017-2 for the property located at 2110, 2114, and 2020 East 1st Street. The project proposes to demolish existing commercial buildings as well as a private lane that serves one of the parcels in the rear, and to construct a new mixed-use residential and commercial community which will consist of 552 affordable family-oriented rental units, 10,000 square feet of commercial leasable space, on-site parking in the form of 556 resident and guest parking spaces as well as 50 commercial parking spaces, open space that's accessible to the public as well as private on-site for the residents, landscaping and on-site amenities, as well as a wraparound fire lane, a portion of which extends onto the property at 2020 East 1st Street. This site photo shows the site as it exists today. The majority of the project site is comprised by the portion toward the left in this photo. It's a vacant auto dealership building toward the front along 1st Street, a commercial center with multiple tenant spaces at the rear, as well as the entirety of this private drive lane that goes straight down the center. A portion of the project also extends to the right of this image onto the property at 2020 East 1st Street. And to illustrate what I just described is this site view showing the three parcels that are affected by the project. The first two on the right are the majority of the project site, as well as a sliver of the fire lane that goes onto the property at 2020, which is the multi-story office building toward the left in that shaded red box. This is the site plan of the proposed project. It's comprised of two buildings totaling 552 units. The commercial component is in the building at right. North is to the right of this image with 1st Street, and the commercial component is along 1st Street. This is the view of the project looking southeast. It shows the leasing center and the retail space, a small surface parking lot serving the retail and leasing center, as well as a portion of that drive aisle and fire lane. This is the same view at dusk. And this is the same view looking southwest from the other corner of the project. This landscape plan illustrates proposed improvements to the site along with the project. The project sits on top a parking podium, so the first level is entirely parking above which the two buildings sit. And this landscape plan sheet shows additional amenities proposed on the site. There's a variety of open space areas for the residents, several playgrounds, picnic areas, barbecue areas, other amenities. And then at the top of the image is the view along 1st Street, showing the applicant's proposed plaza along 1st Street. So to walk you through some of the issues that staff analyzed for the project, just as an overview, the state's density bonus law encourages construction of affordable housing in California in exchange for greater on-site density. Now, in order to make production of those units or affordable units easier, to facilitate it, the state allows applicants to request or jurisdictions to offer incentives or concessions or waivers from development standards. The current version of the law allows up to 3 incentives or concessions and a request for an unlimited number of waivers. And as the years have gone on, the ability of local jurisdictions, such as the City of Santa Ana, to request special studies to justify these incentives, concessions, or waivers has been further restricted. The state allows a maximum density bonus of up to 35% for most projects. And in addition, the city's local inclusionary housing ordinance, known as the Housing Opportunity Ordinance, allows another 35 density bonus on top of the base density. So 35 plus 35 is 70%, and a base density of wherever the project is located. So for this specific site, the project would be analyzed under a typical base density of 90 dwelling units per acre. The project site has just shy of 7 acres, so when you do the math, it leads to 620 units being a base density. This project consists of 552 units, so it's actually below the base density that would be allowed, which is 620 units. However, recent changes to the state law have allowed projects that aren't requesting a numerical density bonus to still exercise their rights under the density bonus law to seek those incentives, concessions, and waivers that I was describing earlier. And the tool to lock in the affordability for the project and to grant those items, the deviations as they're called in our local code, is still the density bonus agreement, even if there's no actual density bonus in terms of number of units. And that's all listed and described in Government Code 65915 and the following sections. So in taking it a step further, staff looked at this project and examined several issues, the first of which was, would these concessions and waivers that they're requesting, could they be avoided if the project were designed differently? So for that, we looked at a comparable project that this body approved, or actually denied and then was appealed not too long ago, the Madison. Similar density. The project was a wrap-style project with a little bit of subterranean parking. Due to a different design, it was able to avoid most of these variances, if you want to call them that, or deviations. However, for a project like this, that would require a different construction type, which would increase their costs. And because this is a 100% affordable project, it would change the nature and viability of this particular project as being a 100% affordable project. The second item that staff analyzed was the unit bedroom mix and its appropriateness for Santa Ana. So 48% of the units in this project are 1 and 2 bedrooms. 52% are 3 and 4 bedrooms. So when you look at the US Census data, Santa Ana's average household size is higher than the Orange County median for households and families. So when we consider a project of this scale, we traditionally look for a greater number of 2 and 3 and 4 bedrooms. This project has a substantial number of 1 bedrooms, and staff found that overall this unit mix may not be the most appropriate for meeting Santa Ana's requirements, at least for people in Santa Ana. The third topic was the reduction in the publicly accessible open space. So that is generally discouraged unless a project is located in a highly amenitized area, such as downtown Santa Ana. So recently this body approved a project at 201 East 4th Street, the 4th Street Market Apartments, and was okay with a reduction in that open space because of the general nature of downtown being amenitized and kind of substituting that sort of component that we often look for. However, in this case, the applicant is exercising his rights under the density bonus law to request that concession. And then should the city consider geographic dispersal of about 1,000 units that are currently proposed by this developer in the same area. So this developer recently had a project approved at 2222 East 1st Street, about 300 feet east of the project site. That plus this project amount to 970 units. And although the Housing Opportunity Ordinance and the local density bonus law in general talk about mixed income projects being located throughout the city, there's no formal policies in either ordinance at this time to actually discourage that sort of proposal. So staff did not apply that to the analysis formally in this project. Moving on, parking. Again, this is something that the applicant has requested as a concession, but he is voluntarily going to provide or is in works to provide a shuttle and or valet service, as well as a parking management plan to accommodate any sort of offsets in demand for locating vehicles off-site. and that's detailed as an exhibit in the staff report. And then just some final last things that relate to the Metro East mixed-use plan about furthering the goals and meeting development standards as we went over, and then fitting into the community. This project is of a similar scale to the buildings in the immediate vicinity. The building at 2020 is about 7 stories. This building's at about 6 stories. There's the Xerox Tower and the State Insurance Comp building. So it's continuing that scale of building, and it is proposing a mixed-use community with commercial, residential, and publicly accessible open space at the front, which is serving to activate First Street and continue that momentum down and help the emergence of a mixed-use pedestrian-oriented area in the MIMU. It still is an area that's in transition. It's not an area that has seen a significant, rise in development until recently. So this is among the first sort of projects that are coming to that area and helping to realize the vision of the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay District. So based on the analysis that's in the staff report, as well as the state's density bonus law and the concessions, incentives, and waivers that are afforded to developers, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission tonight approve site plan review number 2017-9 as condition. As well, I'd just like to clarify that since it is an agreement, tonight you'll be recommending that the City Council approve Density Bonus Agreement number 2017-2, or staff recommends that you do so, with the deal points that were listed in the Planning Commission staff report. The draft resolution before you tonight will need modification to clarify that you would be recommending approval to the City Council that they approve it. So based on that analysis, again, staff recommends these 2 items. Concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ali. What I'd like to do is start out possibly seeing if Beatrice or Eric would like any. Beatrice, would you like to have a question at this time?
I do. So my question for staff is, do we already have a shuttle service that utilizes the OCTA's bus stop as part of its shuttle service operation to any complexes? Do we already have that service? Because I know they're suggesting or recommending that this happen.
Thank you. This would be a first for the city.
Did you hear that, Beatrice?
No. Can you please tell me where it was, Mark?
This will be the first time that a shuttle service has been set up like this in the city.
Okay, thank you. I do have other questions, but I think the questions would be for the applicants.
Okay, and we'll try to rotate around just to make sure everybody gets a fair shot. Eric, do you have a question?
Thank you.
Eric? Eric, do you have a question? Did we lose him? Okay, we'll go on.
Okay.
Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. So on page 3 of the staff report, we talk about concession for the public open space, the rear setback, and parking versus a waiver for the driveway width. Can you explain for us what the difference is?
Sure. The state's density bonus law allows you to request concessions, basically that make a project more feasible. As well, a jurisdiction can offer incentives, almost like a menu, to make these sort of projects more feasible. So those are mostly grouped as incentives/concessions. You can do up to 3.
Okay.
On top of that, a developer can request an unlimited number of what's called waivers, which are essentially mini variances from development standards that would further help build their project when they show that not waiving those standards would render the project difficult or infeasible.
Okay. And so on the concessions, so for instance, just using the parking as an example, when we talk about density bonus, it's not unlimited. You don't say, okay, well, I'm allowed 90 units to the acre. I really want to go to 300 to the acre, and I'm just going to request this concession, and onward, upward they go. There's a limit. It's the 35%, correct?
Density bonus, correct.
Right. So is there any sort of similar limit on the concessions and waivers? In other words, I'm just throwing it out there in theory, could they just come in and say, well, we just don't want to put any parking on the site. We're just going to go with 0. Could they, in theory, do that?
In theory, it's something that an applicant could request.
Right.
And then the burden under the current law would be on the jurisdiction to essentially prove that that would not be positive for the general health, welfare, and safety of the area.
Okay. And so, as an applicant applies for these concessions and waivers, I guess here they are coming to a discretionary board asking for an approval. Are our hands tied? Do we have to approve any portion of this project?
The state law generally makes it very difficult for a local agency to deny these sort of requests unless it has studies that clearly demonstrate that the project would be financially feasible without the concessions, or that the requested waiver or concessions would be detrimental to public health, welfare, and safety, or damaging to historic resources or things like that.
Okay, I'm just, because what I want to understand is from our perspective, is this an exercise in futility? Should this just been something over the counter, or is there any sort of actual discretionary power afforded to us?
I would say, going back to the points that I highlighted earlier, there would have to be some steps taken in order to really prove that the project's requested incentives, concessions, and waivers would not be in the best interests of the health, welfare, and safety of the city. And then using that as evidence, this body could, take an action.
Okay. And then now kind of drilling in a little more. So the proposed driveway width, if I read the staff report correctly, it mentioned that it was less than OCFA, or Orange County Fire Authority's minimum width. So, well, first of all, is it less than the minimum width?
It meets the OCFA width. The OCFA width actually exceeds what the MIMU plan allows. So the MIMU plan says that you can have a maximum 24-foot wide driveway, right. And this project is proposing a width that's greater. And as a result, that's a deviation.
So it's not that they're providing less, they're actually exceeding.
They're providing more, which does not meet the development code.
Okay, right. Yeah, that was my concern, is are we somehow preventing fire from being able to access? So that's good. And then this project has been in the pipeline for quite some time. I know that the applicant's been working with you guys, and I know that they were told, you guys had mentioned about the unit mix, and unit counts. Why were the senior units removed? Was that at the direction or discretion of staff recommending that to the applicant? Was that beyond staff? I'm just trying to understand, because it seemed like they were moving along, and I forget exactly how they were shown to the commission, but it seemed like their project was going to hit the dais any day, and then they went back, obviously retooled the project, and now it doesn't have the 100% seniors. So I'm just curious what happened there.
I'll allow the applicant to provide greater detail on why they made that change, but in general, they received feedback as the project went along and elected to eliminate the senior component.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we hold that to the applicant?
Yeah, that's fine. And then I just have two last questions. So valet service is being proposed. And if I might ask, given that the intent of the MIMU is to encourage this pedestrian-friendly, people are walking on the street, eyes on the street, it seems like the valet service is completely contrary to that notion. Was that ever considered? I mean, to me, it's another expense for the project that seems unnecessary, but I just want to understand, was there something I missed? Because you've got the 64 bus line right there, the 71 that goes up Tustin. We're trying to create a walkable area, all these different design guidelines that provide for those amenities. Why did we all of a sudden say, yes, pedestrian-oriented, all right, let's shuttle everybody around?
Sure. A lot of the points that you highlighted about the bus lines are correct. However, the project site is just shy of being able to be eligible for AB 744. So as a result, they had to request the parking through the concession. As part of alleviating or allaying some of the city's concerns about such a drastic reduction in parking for a family-oriented project, when there may be several working adults per household, the applicant voluntarily approached the city and offered the valet service and shuttle, after which the city, upon hearing about that opportunity, created the sort of coordinated effort among Public Works, the city attorney's office, and planning and building to address that.
I mean, I've worked with plenty of developers that typically would rather not have to manage a service like that, and if it was an opportunity to maybe provide funds to OCTA, and say, hey, please don't cut back service on the 64 and the 71, maybe there would be an opportunity there. But I was curious what the mechanism was for that. And my last question is, where's the map of the off-site parking lots that are supposed to be a part of this project? Because I didn't see that in my staff report.
That is something that's still being refined by the applicant. So the applicant is actually still working to see if a shuttle will be proposed and or the valet service. And so that's something that we're continuing to negotiate with them, and ultimately will be built into the density bonus agreement that goes before City Council. But at this time, the applicant is still, and we worded it as such in the conditions and in the staff report, and or shuttle service, valet service. So they haven't locked them in yet.
So then staff has not received an actual plan that shows where these lots will be located?
Staff received a very early concept of those sites surrounding the project site, but it was something that was so preliminary on the part of the applicant, and it's something that's still subject to their own private negotiations with those surrounding parking lots, that it's not something that's ripe to be included in staff report.
So it hasn't been resolved yet at this time?
No, however, tonight the applicant may be able to clarify in the time since we've last met and tonight how much progress they've made.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Lynette?
Okay.
Ken?
Thank you.
I have just only one question. What is the current state law regarding to ordinance regarding to the parking space requirement for set affordable housing component like this versus our own city?
Sure. So the city's parking requirements for a project like this in the Metro East area require 2 spaces per unit. So that's city requirement. Then the state's density bonus law offers almost like menu incentive of reduced parking depending on the bedroom count of the project. So I believe it's 1 space for every studio and 1 bedroom, 1.5 spaces for every 2 bedroom, and then 2 spaces for every 3 and 4 bedroom above. So that's the sort of built-in ability you can exercise in the state's density bonus law. And then AB 744, as we were describing earlier, if this project were at a critical hub or along a very active line and met certain other requirements, could go down to 1/2 a space per unit. So this project is right around the second option that I described, although it's just shy of meeting that, and that's why they're requesting the concession.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Eric? We've lost Eric? Okay. Beatrice, have you got any other questions of staff?
You know what? Yes. In the greenhouse, I think it's the greenhouse gas analysis report, where it says that because this is a family affordable housing project, so I'm assuming there will be some seniors, and I believe that we're going to set aside some parking spaces for seniors. If those aren't used, are they transferable, or how do they handle that?
I'm sorry, portion of the question wasn't entirely clear. Could you repeat it?
This is a parking spaces.
She's looking for specific parking places for seniors.
Oh, okay. So this project, thank you, this project does not include a senior component to it. It's entirely family-oriented.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind repeating that, please?
This project does not include any senior component. It's family-oriented. So
okay,
in essence,
right,
we can say that the seniors go 1 block, half a block down to the senior affordable housing that exists there. But I'll ask the question, maybe it's a question of the applicant I'll ask, but when we look at it from a family-oriented, is there an age gap? Is there an age boundary that exists to make it affordable family housing?
That's something we can ask the applicant. I know that for the senior project, there is a minimum age requirement.
That's fine. All right, thank you, Ellie. Would the applicant at this time like to speak?
Good evening, Chairman and Commission members. My name's Laura Archuleta, and I'm president of Jamboree Housing Corporation. Jamboree is a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered in Irvine, and we're an affordable housing developer and services provider that works statewide. We have about 8,500 units, and about 16,000 Californians call one of our properties home. We're partnering on this project with the Pacific Companies, and we'll be the long-term owner and operator of this property along with the senior property that you mentioned earlier. We've been involved in the city of Santa Ana for close to 30 years, and we're very active in the Cornerstone Village area where we've done extensive acquisition rehab and worked with the law enforcement agencies there to turn around that neighborhood. So we're excited to be here before you talking new construction, which is what Jamboree has done a lot of and has been encouraged to do here in Santa Ana, because you can do so much more than just doing an acquisition rehab project. With me tonight, I have representatives from Jamboree, from the Pacific Companies, from the architecture company, from consultants, so that we can hopefully answer all of your detailed questions. I did just want to say overall, again, we're very excited to be proposing this type of project that can have such a huge impact, high quality, meeting all of the state density bonus requirements, completely compliant, and I can specifically talk to a few questions that came up in the discussion tonight. I did want to talk a little bit about the unit mix. We do have about 8%, approximately 8% of the units set aside for one bedrooms in this property. And although it is a family-focused property, there's no age requirement, and there's no requirement that it's a family per se. It's just that the majority of the units are 2, 3, and 4 bedroom. So what we find in those one-bedroom units often in our affordable housing is it may be somebody who's in the workforce there that works close by. That's what I envision in this property because of all of the commercial around there. I also sometimes see seniors. We have seniors who do not want to be set aside in a senior property. They don't maybe like that stigma. They are still working. They are very active. They like being around kids. And so sometimes we do see seniors in those one bedrooms, and there's no restriction against that. The other comment that came up, and this is something we really have taken a hard look at. I've been in this industry for 30 years now, having worked on the city side and now working as a nonprofit in the community development side, are we looking at an overconcentration potentially of affordable units? And so how Jamboree looked at that and how our board of directors looked at it was really to see who is in that community right now. And so right now in that community, the folks are earning what it would take to live in this property. So we're not talking about restricting units to an income level where we'd have to go outside of the immediate area to find very low income and low income folks. They're already there. So I don't think of it as a concentration of poverty because we're not taking something and building it and bringing people in. We're actually serving the residents who live in that area right now. All we're doing is we're actually charging them a rent that is affordable to their income, where right now they're overpaying for their housing costs. So we recently surveyed our residents living at our Santa Ana properties right now to get an idea from them on what impacts they saw when they moved in. So our residents that moved in, 5% of them came from homelessness, and this is the same income targeting. This is a percentage at very low and the remainder at lower. So 5% actually came from a homeless shelter and moved in. 37% came from market rate units where they were overpaying in their housing costs, and now they're paying what they should be. And then 58% came from overcrowded housing units, and this is where you see 2, 3, and 4 families living together. It's really impacting our single-family neighborhoods here in Orange County, and I know folks are very concerned about that. When you see the overcrowding of cars on the streets in those single-family neighborhoods, you know people are renting out their units to multiple families. The other thing that jumped out to us, and I think this is huge, it's a little different because it's not just the city, but in our Santa Ana properties, when people moved into affordable housing where they're paying about 30% of their income towards rent, With that additional income, they were able to go off of the food stamp program and actually go out and buy healthy food themselves with their income. Additionally, 14% of them actually got employed when they weren't employed, so they could find a job and felt supported with that. They got off of the CalWorks program, and 14% of them stopped using the emergency room for their healthcare needs. They actually started using clinics and healthcare providers. The savings of that to the whole system is over $500,000 a year in those taxing entities. So we see this as being a huge benefit to the community because, again, these are the incomes of the folks out there right now. We're just making it so that they have an affordable rent. I did want to touch on one more item before I'll kind of refer to the experts in each of the specific areas. We do have a valet program running at one of our properties right now. It's in Irvine. And the reason why we implemented the valet is because where we were developing, the bus line had not come in yet. It was planned by OCTA. We kept waiting and waiting. It wasn't there. So now we actually operate that where we take our residents to the train station and some of the active bus stops, and it's worked very well. So shed a little bit of light on that. So I guess next, if there's specific questions, I know I did have a chance to talk about some of the off-site parking ideas with the team. It is a commercial area. It's a really nice complementary use to park in the evening at some of the places of employment when the parking lots are open, and probably a revenue source that they hadn't taken into account when they opened up their commercial businesses there. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chair, and see if you have any further comments.
We'll start. Beatrice, do you have a question for Laura?
I do, yes. My question is, on the report, it says that the valet service is going to be free, but then when I read the report, it says that AMG is going to rent out parking spaces for the valet service. So who's going to pay for those parking spaces that are going to be reserved for free for valet service?
Right.
Or how does it work?
Right. So the way it's proposed is that under the current proposal, the required parking is the one-to-one unit. So those residents who want additional parking then will be charged for that.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And I have one more question.
Go ahead.
In the report, it says that you're going to create a crime-free, which you put, I think in quotation, I don't remember, but crime-free housing policies. Can you just briefly define what you mean with crime-free? Like, is that security 24/7, or what is crime-free according to you?
Yeah, so how we start with our crime-free program is we work with very experienced architects who are familiar with the CPTED program, the crime, what does that stand for? That's crime prevention through environmental design, thank you. And so the design of the building from the get-go, I mean, we're much further ahead than the issues we faced, in Minnie Street, where you've got a controlled access, you've got the key fob, there's going to be a camera system in place. The camera systems that we've used is when there's something triggered, they are monitored cameras, and you have folks, then security folks, that come right out to the site as needed. There will be 24/7 property management, of course, living on site, they're on site. And, if there's any uptick in criminal activity, then we'll respond, of course, appropriately, as we always do at our properties. But I think a lot is taken care of by having a secure design and putting the key fabs in place, educating residents. The other thing is, in the long-term property management, we know who are in those units. Because we have what are called tax credit investors in these properties, we have very strict guidelines on who lives there. We take photos of the folks who are in the units, so if somebody's living in that unit who's not supposed to be there, because it threatens our whole financial layering on the property, of which we're guaranteeing delivery of those tax credits, and so we take it really seriously. So it's really a different structure than what you might think of in market rate housing, where you see sometimes overcrowding or people moving in or kids maybe moving home who have caused problems in the past and shouldn't be there. Everything's very regulated.
Did you get all of that, Beatrice?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ken?
Yes, I do. Could you explain to us a little bit more about your First Point Valley services? Because I just looked to the internet. I have not found any information of any city or any services with that so-called First Point shuttle or valley services. The second question is, you talked about the resident of the valley services. So the valley attendant must have somewhere outside parking lot somewhere to able to, to park those vehicles that they're attending for, right? So will you give us more information regarding that?
Yeah, so the vision for the shuttle, and our shuttle at our Irvine property is not called, it's operated through Jamboree, so it's just a Jamboree shuttle is what it's called there. And so that, again, it's much easier. You have residents sign up for when they need to be shuttled to, in the morning based on their job. And so initially we had scheduled times on our property of when it was going to leave, but what we found out was based on workload demand, we could adjust that. And so that's been really effective there. Again, that's in the city of Irvine. The valet services, the vision there is that the property would have these contracts with off-site parking lots, and then as needed, when a resident parks over there, they notify the valet comes and picks them up and brings them in. Vice versa, when they're ready to go, they come down, the valet runs them to their car.
So where is the location of those off-site parking
Yeah,
spaces?
so that's what's in negotiations right now with several of the commercial buildings around the property. Again, these are operators who do not use, because the high demand time for the parking will be at night, and these are operators who do not use their parking at night.
This service is only available to residents. What about the guests of the resident?
Right. So if it's optional. I mean, the way I envision this working is if you want a space, if you want to pay, because again, they're getting billed for these spaces. If you want an extra space, then you would pay for an extra space.
Oh, I see. Also, you mentioned on your report, you mentioned the valet services or shuttle services free during peak hours. What about non-peak hours? Is there a fee involved?
Yeah, no. So how we run it, the shuttle. Yeah, how we run the shuttle at our other property is like we don't have anything going like after 8 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning. So there's not a shuttle during that time. It's really geared towards the heavy time. The thinking is that there could be people who can be shuttled to this train station and maybe not have that extra car, so then they only need the one parking space.
I see. Thank you.
That's it, Ken?
That's fine. Thank you.
Lynette?
I just had a quick question. I didn't see any bike depots. Do you have any of those on site for because I also, there's mention in there that there's only a few of the apartments will have balconies. So.
Right. Yeah. So what is the vision? Ask the architect the vision for the bikes, because we usually will put a bike room in where they can keep their bike. We actually have a new project coming online that will have like a bike checkout program, which is really cool in West Sacramento, similar to where you can check out cars, you can check out bikes, which is really neat. So I don't know.
Good evening, Tobin Simink with Architects Orange. Within the garage area, there is a bike storage location, so it's at the first floor, readily accessible right off of East First Street.
And that's open. It's not assigned to.
It is not assigned.
Oh, so it'd be open to whoever has bicycles. To lock them up there. Is that I would assume that some people will be using that mode of transportation to get to work and back.
Correct. Right. It would be publicly accessible. but it's secure. It'd be secure storage for those, whether they're on-site or off-site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question. So I just want to confirm the 566 residential parking spaces, are those the spaces provided on-site, or is that going to be total for the project?
Those are the spaces provided on-site. Catch me, correct? Correct, yeah.
And then, so I guess one other question would be, how many parking spaces, now I don't know, maybe this is for staff or the applicant, how many parking spaces will be asked to be provided off-site?
The request is for the reduction in space. So the approval would be based on what's being proposed here. Any additional space that is going to be provided by the applicant would be over and above what's being asked here. So there isn't a specific number that we would require, because their request is for a concession on the number of spaces. And your approval would be based on what's considered tonight.
On-site?
On-site.
Now, if I read correctly, there was a portion of the draft resolution that had those deal points, and part of it was these provision of off-site parking spaces. So I'm just throwing it out there. So if they come in with a 10-space parking lot, they say, ta-da, here's our off-site. Is there something in the deal that's being proposed that would say we would want the applicant to provide a minimal amount of off-site parking?
So the idea is that the state legislature have put in what we consider to be regulation that may not reflect local conditions, and we really have to react to what the state law is allowing a developer to ask for. In this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance between what the state has minimized in terms of the concessions and what we're able to come up with way to mitigate potential issues. So one of the way to mitigate, an example, is the Valley Services, which would help to allocate parking spaces not only on-site but off-site. We're working with the applicant to also have a very strong parking management plan on-site. Project that has unbundled parking where you get charged for parking, in addition to strong language in the lease that talks about car ownership and management of parking. These are ways that we work with the applicant to help potentially mitigate problems in terms of what we see as a shortage of parking. So if they come into us with a 10-space parking and it's something that we see that could be used to the advantage of the project, we certainly would consider it. But obviously we want to look for all available parking spaces. It's not the ideal situation, but it's a way to help hedge some of the problem that could come out of this project.
Drilling back to my initial question, though, so there is nothing right now, though, that quantifies the amount of parking that the applicant would provide off-site?
Not for the project as a condition of approval. You are being requested based on what's been requested.
For on-site?
Correct.
This time. Okay, thank you.
Just one other question. If someone came in and wanted, let's say they applied for one of the apartments, but they had 3 or 4 cars, could they be denied? Or would they just have to, because I think there's something mentioned in here that they'll be signing contracts when they rent the apartments as to what they can or can't do with parking. Is that grounds for that, or is that considered like discrimination? How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, the parking management plan, it's not grounds for discrimination because it's a plan that's applied to everybody who's applying, right? So everybody's treated fairly. So they're informed right away that there's one assigned parking space, and we monitor that. And then if there's a need for off-site parking, we let them know how much that cost is going to be, and then we just manage it from there. I think it would be difficult if somebody had 4 cars. I think it would be probably cost prohibitive for this income group. So in forward thinking of the folks living at our other properties is most likely you're going to have a lot of young families in those 3 and 4 bedroom units. You may have more of the single workforce in the 1 and 2 bedroom units.
Yeah, I would assume so. That
Yeah.
makes sense. I just didn't know if you could say, no, this isn't the place I think that you want to be, because that's not going to work for you, especially if you have to pay for additional parking.
Parking,
It could get
yeah.
expensive.
It could get really cost prohibitive, sure.
We want to check. Eric, are you here? He said, should we note that he dropped off at 6:06?
Yes.
Okay, so could you please make that notation that he left the conference at 6:06? I've got a few questions, and you kind of brought up, I mean, having a crime-free program, which is great. To me, if you're going to do this shuttle process, you're going to do this off-site parking and everything else. Really, this program, in my book, at this point in time, should be at the beginning something of it's a blend of however it can be, but it needs to be sort of 24/7, because if people are off-site and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd hate to see them having to walk, from an off-site parking space to the facility, to their home, and, be subject to possible, problems that could exist. Because, it's not a highly residential area. It's a commercial area, which means that there's a lot of people that leave. But the commercial areas are also the areas where there are issues that exist that are not, that do not exist in residential areas.
I think that's a great point. I think the shuttle, because I envision the shuttle being more on a regular kind of loop based on dropping off at the train station and the transportation centers, and I see the valet being a more personalized approach. I think we could look at those hours and see, when those hours need to be, because you're right, you're not going to want people walking too far in an industrial area to their car, or from their car at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So I think we should definitely explore that on the valet program, definitely, because we have staff living on site. We have staff there that can be doing that.
Right. The other thing you said, they are assigned parking spaces inside of the facility. Are they assigned parking spaces outside the facility if they buy that feature?
Right. So the on site we have the residential units, but we also have, I believe it's 50 units, 50 parking spaces for the commercial also, because there is a commercial component to this.
Right.
But in the off-site parking, I don't believe that they're assigned spaces. They would be assigned a lot where they would be their parking.
Okay. And how are you going to control the people that don't decide to use their car or don't decide to go to work and they're in a lot that's a commercially used lot during the day?
Yeah. I think it would be the same way where there'll be signs posted and they'll have a parking permit, and if you don't have a permit, you can be towed, is all I could imagine.
Okay, and doing the parking permit, the comment was made earlier about how do you handle guests, and you mentioned, well, they have to pay for that. I mean, they're not going to have to buy a parking space for the year. I mean, the parking permit program that exists in Santa Ana today, you have a parking sticker for your car, and then you're also given 30 temporary parking permits that are allowed to be used once.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
That's a great idea. I mean, we could do something like that, or I'm just envisioning if I lived there and I had a permit, but I had a guest that was often coming and staying, that maybe I'm parking my car on the lot if I've got the lot permit and they're coming in and parking in my space, something like that.
You're setting up an area where people are going to want to have parties, get-togethers, and things like that, and you don't have guest parking on site. You've got the retail parking, but you really, that retail parking is assigned to the retail portion of your facility. I think you've got to look at some plan and strategy to handle off-site what you're going to do relative to a one-day event or.
The one-day passes is a great idea. So if somebody, maybe that's put into the management plan, that if somebody knows they're going to be hosting a party, they work with property management, they need 20 parking passes for the off-site parking, and they put in and they get them for that day, and they're a certain color or something like that. That's a great idea. Okay. I think it's going to be a bit, now again, I have not managed an off-site valet parking like that, but I think that it all falls in line with what you're talking about right there. And we have 6 developments in Anaheim, and very similar issues that we just kind of look at to make sure that we're meeting all of the demands of the residents, we're not impacting the neighborhoods. Jamboree is a build and hold company, we're not building and selling, so we're here for the long haul, and going to make sure that it's operated correctly.
Well, I think the other consideration and conversation is that, we're looking at your parking study, and your parking study, for instance, leads you to say that more people are going to be walking, more people are going to be taking mass transit, and more people are going to be bicycling. So to go back on Lynette's question, what's the scalability that you plan with regards to bikes? Because if you don't have that scalability for your bike locker, then all of a sudden you have people bringing their bikes through the halls and leaving them outside their units and everything else. So how do you control? That's another facet to control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was mentioning our West Sacramento project. They just opened up. They're not just even regular bicycles. They're the bicycles that are like electric with it, and you just swipe your card. You're a member, and then you can ride it like to work. Just down the street to the Capitol, do what you need to do, and ride it back, or right along the river there. And people are using that. So, I don't know if the city's looked at a bike sharing program like that, but it's definitely something that we could look at.
And the last question I had was regarding services. The current density agreement has a discussion around services. And I don't know whether you want to answer it, Min, or have Laura answer it, but what sort of services are we looking at this point in time in this agreement?
So some of the things that we're considering for projects, and the whole concept is that we want a project that is supportive of the residents. Since it is something that is an affordable platform, we want to enhance the ability of our residents to be successful with those projects. So an example could be providing community computer labs, job resources being offered on site in terms of helping to connect people with jobs, looking at potentially after school type program for family with children, either daycare or if there's a need, or also for tutoring. The idea is that parents that need these type of help would have it available right on site. So the whole concept of supportive housing beyond just being an affordable project would make these type of projects much more successful in terms of achieving its goal for breaking the cycle of challenges, financial challenges that people have, and giving that ability to have permanent housing or even be successful enough to move forward. Okay. So those are the types of services that we're working with the CDA to include into the density bonus agreement. The crime-free housing, that's the idea with that is not only through environmental design, but through the management process. If there are incidents of residents creating issues with law enforcement or legal issues, the management has this ability to potentially evict based on the types of crimes. So the idea is not to provide an avenue for over-concentration of crime activity that may be associated with affordable housing. So those are the things that we're looking to implement in the density bonus agreement. And the goal also is to help reduce the reliance on city resources for those types of services.
One thing to consider that I'm not sure everybody understands is that if you're talking about an after-school program or something that deals with the elementary kids and things like that, it's not Santa Ana Unified School District, it's the Tustin Unified School District that covers that particular section of the city. So, if we're going to, are we going to engage something like that as part of the density agreement within the boundaries of Santa Ana?
The after-school services, the after-school services are generally provided by, resources that they can partner with that are nonprofits, or either they can source with contractors to help with that. It's not a school program that is generally associated with any type of school district or the formal education program.
Think Together, which has after-school programs, is actually around the corner from, it's on 4th Street.
Yeah, and they're awesome. It's an interesting question. We do reach out to the local school, so we make sure whatever we're teaching and whatever we're doing coordinates. But, we have one of our Irvine properties in the IBC area actually served by the Santa Ana Unified School District. So it's like, we're kind of used to this crossover, right? They don't align exactly with the boundaries. But yeah, so what we're teaching there, we're not necessarily teaching the same curriculum as any of the school districts. We're teaching the kids self-confidence, how to interact with folks. We do provide some homework assistance after school. We'll have a computer lab there. And then especially for any seniors there, and then at the other senior property, we'll be providing a lot of outreach services. So we've got the Alzheimer's Center that we work with. And we do have food distribution going on at some of our properties also if needed, especially at our senior properties. So we do a lot of coordination, and that's what we do. It's in Santa Ana specifically, we've got Minnie Street. We'll have these properties. We are breaking ground on Santa Ana Veterans Village. 70 units of the veterans housing will be under construction in December. So we're going to have quite a big social services program running here in the city of Santa Ana.
Well, the other opportunity you have is that since you've got 5% of your, tenants are coming from homeless environments and such, there is also, you need to look at the community college with Santa Ana College with regards to the fact that they do a lot of training and retraining for skills. So
that's a great idea.
I mean, it would be good to see that kind of an agreement tied together because it brings the schools and the community back, brings them together.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, Phil? Lynette? Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We, Madam Secretary, have we received any communication on this item?
We have not.
Okay. We'll now open the public hearing. If anybody would like to, at this point in time, comment on this item number 1, you'll have 3 minutes. Please fill out a card with the secretary. I'll start with Dale Helvick.
Good evening, Commissioners. Concessions come at a cost. This project could have gone up as high as 1,054 units at who knows how many parking spots, but the developer decided to go to 552 and 100 parking spots because I'm sure that was a price point that they came across that was feasible to them. But the density bonus calculation for units at 1054 and the density calculations or the number for parking units is supposed to be 2.0. Those two numbers just don't jive to me. You can't have 1054 as being the bonus number and then 0 parking. It's just hard to believe. 17th and Main southeast quadrant area between there and the 55 or the 5 freeway, there's apartment buildings there, and off-site parking is rampant up in that area. I don't know why we think it's going to be different around this area. People drive all the way up to behind Guarantee Chevrolet, park their vehicles up there because there's no parking for them down around the apartment buildings that they live in. That habit, it's not going to change this because we provide valet service. These are promises that can't be fulfilled. Most projects that come in that are going to bring revenue to the city, they talk about the 25-year forecast. What's the 25-year forecast for this valet service? What's the cost basis that they're running to keep this viable for 25 years? Or have they even said how long they're going to keep it running? It's not identified any place. So in order to make it viable, they need to make sure that they're going to be committed to providing this service. But they're doing it on rented property that they don't have any control of. What happens when that property all of a sudden gets bought and sold and someone else wants to develop it for some other project? That property goes away. Their valet service now is driving them 5-10 miles away to find an open lot someplace that they can utilize for valet service. So I hope you guys ask these questions as far as what's going to happen in the future, not just what's going to happen in the next couple of years after the project's developed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Boris Riesly?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Boris Gressley. I am here on behalf of the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee. We are an organization comprised of the Carpenters Union and union contractors with the mission to crack down on wage theft and payroll fraud through our labor compliance and safety compliance activity. I'm here tonight neither to support nor oppose the project, just to simply introduce myself and state that we are going to be monitoring this project as it moves along and to make sure that it complies with law. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. Pam Cepeda? No?
No.
Okay. Michael Massini?
No, also.
Making this easy. That's all I have as far as public comments at this point in time. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to make a public comment on item number 1? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments. Thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission. Does anyone have a comment at this point in time? Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the design of the project. I think it looks attractive. It would be a welcome addition to the area. I've seen Architects Orange work on other projects before, so I know it'll be quality in that regard. And I also like the idea of having the off-site parking. As I said earlier, I think the valet thing is unnecessary. I think the idea of actually realizing the intent of the MIMU for folks to walk to a car, I don't think that's a horrible thing. We're trying to create that sort of synergy. We want the eyes on the streets. We don't want people afraid. And yeah, if they're out there at 10 o'clock at night, I would love to see people walking. I'd like to see people out there. I don't want to see people afraid to be out there. And if we're going to continue to be, operate and develop in that way, well, we're never going to have safe streets. We're not going to have what the MIMU is proposing or suggesting that we evolve towards. But my concern, though, right now with the project, the thing that I'm just trying to get over at this point is we don't really have a set plan as to what's going to be done on the parking. We have 566 residential spaces on site, but nobody has been able to at least relax my comfort as far as there would be enough parking available. And I think a gentleman who came up during the comments portion who had said, yeah, what if you have a site that is part of the plan? So I'm just going to throw some raw numbers out there. Let's say you identify 500 off-site spaces, and you've got agreements with them. This valet shuttle is running between them, and one of those parking lots happens to be 100 spaces that the owner decides to turn around and develop. Now you're down those spaces, and where are you going to make up those spaces? And I want to see people throughout Santa Ana, whether they're in a market rate project, an affordable project, use transit. But I feel like right now the transit is not exceptional enough, hence why we have the parking standards we have. And, frankly, I know I'm jumping around here, but I don't even really like the way the MIMU lays out the parking. It's 2 spaces per unit. That unit could be a bachelor pad or it could be a 5-bedroom, but it's 2 spaces. And that just, to me, doesn't make sense. I think it doesn't work. So another concern I had was the fact that in the staff report, it indicated that the parking study said that the peak demand of vehicles would be 349 vehicles. And we're going to have 552 units. And I get it. There will be people using transit. They'll be biking. But I really am reluctant to believe that the demand will be 349 vehicles, or 349 spaces, excuse me. So again, I'm really torn because I like the project. I like where the design, the outlook. I'm relieved that the driveway width is actually more, not less. So, again, there's positives to this project, but right now I'm not comfortable with the fact that it's really ambiguous as to what the parking management plan is going to be. I really wish that, and I know there's time constraints, but I really wish staff had made more of an effort to bring us something with a little more finite detail, not hey, Commission, just trust us, just rubber stamp it, and then we'll figure it out later. Because later on, when it's not figured out, and I have faith in staff, but if it isn't, if something goes wrong, all of us have to live with the fact that we approved something, but we really didn't know the full impact. And so that's just my comments right now. I'd love to hear from my colleagues.
Lynette?
So one thing that was mentioned earlier, which I think was a really profound statement, was that, we're dealing with it in Washington Square as well, is that people are coming into our neighborhood and parking, and they're living in the apartments over in the Willard neighborhood. But I believe one of the reasons that's happening is something that was said earlier, is because of overcrowding. Because you have 4 families living in one apartment because they're paying market rate apartment rental fees. So this project here is going to, I think, drive exactly what I think is putting people in a place that they can afford to live and not have to be living on top of each other with their aunts, uncles, grandparents, sisters, brothers, and everybody in the family just to make rent. So I think that in itself is going to help. And then secondly, I think the management team, I think Jamboree has already proven to be a successful organization. And other projects that they've done throughout Orange County, they have a proven track record. If we look at the Cornerstone project, which is an amazing transformation of that neighborhood. So that in itself gives me I feel better about that. Now, it's not perfect, obviously, but I think at the same time, even with the parking, with the concessions, we're kind of tied here with state law. I think the state's driving some of this that is basically handcuffing our local jurisdiction from being able to have more teeth. So that's disappointing in itself, because I've always been a huge advocate for adequate parking, but I don't think we might even really have a choice in this matter. And I appreciate the fact that the applicant is going above and beyond to find a way that works to make everybody happy. And I don't know if it's going to be valet. I don't know if it's going to be shuttle. I think I'm okay that they don't know yet, because it's going to be a work in progress. It's going to be something that it's going to have. It's like anything you do. You do something at home and you hang up the picture, and it might not be in the right place, and then you have to rehang it somewhere else until you find that perfect place. That's what's going to happen with this parking situation. And I think that based on the reputation that they have, I think they're going to do its best, because they have to meet the needs of their residents, and they also have to meet the needs of the city. And they're under the gun. They're the pioneers to make this happen. I think they know that they're going to be under very watchful eyes to make this work, and that other projects will be doing that in the future are going to have to follow suit as well. So those are my thoughts on that. So I am in a place that I would support or be willing to move the motion forward.
Do you want to make a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd like to say I want to adopt a resolution approving site plan review set 2017-09 as conditioned, and adopt a resolution approving, what is it? It's a recommendation. So number 2 is adopt or recommend to City Council approving the density bonus agreement application 2017-02 as conditioned.
Okay, do we have a second?
I would like to add additional to that.
You can comment first. You'll have to have a second.
Okay. I am strong believe in any business, any development of housing in our city, because our city really experience a major shortage of housing. I do support the project, but I would like to add a condition to it, modify the condition to the resolution, that the condition that the applicant must provide to the city a listing of location for additional parking that would provide for valet parking or additional park, to the city before the final approval.
Let me clarify for staff. Isn't that already part of the conditions? As part that's part of their parking management plan? in order for them
It's going to be a part of the density bonus agreement.
Okay.
But we can include the language so it's clarified for the project. I think
Okay.
either way will be good.
that you'll have the specific locations of the off-site parking?
Yes.
And the number of spaces?
And the number of available spaces so that we can have tracking of those spaces, correct.
But there was one statement made that I don't know. You
Yep.
said before approval.
That is correct. The
Before final occupancy of the buildings? When you talk about final approval, meaning that after construction and before occupancy?
That is correct. That's correct.
Yes.
So you're
Without-
establishing it as occupancy, not as before approval tonight?
No, before occupancy of the project, yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Right.
All right, just wanted to clarify that because that was stated that way. All right, Patrice, do you have anything to say at this time? Bye, Patrice. Well, no, Patrice is.
Sorry, I had my mute button. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I just wanted to tell the applicants that, in looking at both of their reports, they really did a wonderful job. I mean, I've been on the commission for about a year and a half, and I don't think I've seen one such as theirs. I mean, both of the reports were the health risk and the gas emissions, and they were just extensive and they were nicely created, gave us a lot of information, and I appreciate that about them. Now, I heard the motion from Commissioner Moreno. Can you tell me, did Commissioner Nguyen make a second, or did he add an amendment?
No, Commissioner Nguyen made an amendment which basically stated that we had to have the parking strategy and the specific lots identified before physical occupancy of the facility.
That is correct.
Got it. Thank you. Well, if the motion from Commissioner Moreno still stands, I would like to second her motion.
Well, the original motion with the amendment from Commissioner Nguyen is where we stand right now. Would you like to second that?
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
I was just going to mention,
I need to
Reno,
accept
do
the
you
condition.
accept that motion? Okay, that amendment? Okay.
I accept the conditions on my motion.
Okay. Lynette has accepted the conditions that have been added to the original motion. The original motion is to approve item number 1 in its totality. So my question to you is, would you like to second that?
Yes, I would like to second that motion.
Okay, so the second is Patrice Mendoza. All right. Any other discussion? Phil?
Just so I'm clear for my colleagues, so you do not, as part of your motion, don't want to introduce a requirement for a minimum amount of off-site parking? Okay. To me, I just think that there's been a lot of projects that have come through the city, and they have their merits, and we absolutely need more housing. But I just, with the ambiguous issues on the parking, again, I like the concept, and I'm okay with off-site parking. I'm okay with people walking to it. But if we're going to be ambiguous about how much we're providing, and we've all talked about in some way, shape, or form tonight how parking is impacted in our neighborhoods. So here we are with the ability to address this issue up front, and we're not. I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Phil. Basically, what I'd like to say is, first of all, I think Lynette said it very well, and that is that, this project is sort of a pioneer project for Santa Ana and for affordable housing. I think there's a lot of great opportunity that can come out of this project if it all folds together the way it's expected. I think there has been some great work done on the project. I do want to say, though, that at this point in time, we are going to rely on you men and your staff to really make sure that as we go forward and execute this bonus density agreement, that the concerns that have been addressed by the commission at this point in time are going to be covered from that perspective.
Absolutely, and I just want to share with the commission that we don't have a perfect process. Unfortunately, we're unable to address a lot of the state's mandates. I think our goal here is to put enough mechanism in place to help us mitigate and have the opportunity to mitigate, because as a performance standards, we're able to work with the applicant to address the needs of the parking on an as-needed basis. I'll tell you, my absolute goal is to have a strong enough management parking be in a part of the lease, so that residents that live there, it's a privilege to live there. It's not something that's a right. An affordable housing project is one that is a privilege. So people living there needs to understand that this type of living is not for everyone, but it's also a privilege, and that you need to observe the rule. So the goal is actually not to have any off-site parking, but to make sure that it meets on-site, that the residents respect the parking limitation and having the lease in place to enforce that. So the valley parking, the off-site parking are mechanism that we have to fall back if we face challenges with the parking management. But if parking management program on-site works well, we may not have a need for the off-site. And that is the goal, because the goal, I know the infrastructure is not there currently, but we're planning for that. So these type of conditions, and I get the nebulous conditions that create this performance standard, but that's exactly what they are. It gives us the flexibility through the contract to enforce and problem solve as they come along.
But I also want to go back to what Lynette also mentioned, and that is that one of the things that has to be done here also is how do you control, because there's people that are going to have 2 cars, for instance. How do you control that they're going to say they have a second car? If they don't want to pay the fee, they're going to find some place to park their car. And what's happened in the past, and I hate to say it, but Lynette just identified that the problem in parking came over from Willard. Well, that came in part because Floral Park put permit parking all along the bottom of the neighborhood, so the Willard district people couldn't possibly come over, which there was a huge problem in parking for the last 10 years. That was corrected. It's now over in Washington Square. That's what I'm hearing.
I absolutely agree with you, but the difference here, what you have is an actual mechanism to manage the parking through the enforcement of the lease. If the residents does not comply with the lease terms, they lose the privilege of living there with an affordable housing, cost. So that is the hammer, as you said, to be able to differentiate this type of project from projects that we have approved in the past, where those mechanisms are not in place.
Okay, I appreciate your support on that. Any other comments from the commission? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, can we take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Becerra.
No.
Commissioner Moreno.
Yes.
Commissioner Alderetti is not here. Chair McLaughlin.
Yes.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen.
Yes.
The final vote is 4-1 with Commissioner Alderetti absent.
And Commissioner Contreras-Leo absent.
Yes, I'm sorry. Commissioner Contreras-Leo and Commissioner Alderetti absent.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to staff comments.
None at this time. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to commissioner comments. Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask staff for an update on MHA and the enforcement situation over there.
It is an open enforcement situation. No action has been taken on by the applicant, and the city will begin citing.
So the 60 days has been passed, correct? And they've decided not to apply for a CUP?
They have not. And they have not done any of the corrections.
Okay, so they basically have ignored our request as a city. And then my other question then is, there was a letter that was I guess, staff had found that had mentioned that based on a particular part of the California code, that they believed that they didn't have to operate with a CEP and that staff was supposed to be researching it. So it's been quite some time. I'm hoping you guys have a conclusion at this point. And what's the conclusion? They do not. I respectfully disagree. So you're saying that based on the state code, so it just complete. So these groups can just plop down anywhere in a C2 zone, and with no discretion, with no discretionary actions afforded. Okay. Thank you.
Beatrice, would you like to comment at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask you to please close the meeting, if you don't mind, in memory of Alex Maldonado. Alex Maldonado started the Santa Ana LULAC Council. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Alex Maldonado?
Yes, he started the Santa Ana LULAC Council, and he just passed away, so I wanted to honor him as the Orange County District Director for LULAC. I wanted to close the meeting in his memory, if we may.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do that. Lynette?
No comments.
Ken?
This is the very first time I attend a meeting with a teleconference type of meeting. To be honest with you, I don't feel comfortable with it, honestly, because I don't feel the attendee of the meeting could able to have a full attention to the meeting and able to have. I'm not sure. Do they have like a video images like of like a city council meeting to the cable net TV network or something, or is this only audio only? Only. I think if commissioner could not able to attend the meeting because of business or to be away out of town, they could excuse from the meeting. And then if we have enough commissioner to make the meeting quorum, and then we conduct the meeting. If not, we just cancel the meeting for the next schedule. I personally don't feel comfortable with the teleconference meeting. Thank you.
Okay. I think one of the things that we're going to talk about in the very near future is the Brown Act. And I think, this type of meeting is done with respect to the Brown Act, and so there is some timing aspects that we need to take into consideration. But we'll talk about that on a whole when we get everybody together. Okay. I just have a couple of comments. One is that, I just reiterate, Ming, that we really need to make sure that we understand why the timing of this forced us to have this special meeting and everything else. But there are some challenges on the table, and it would be good for us to come on the high side, the acceptable side of those challenges, rather than on the bottom of the challenges. And I want to make sure you take that.
It's completely understood, and that is my goal as well, is to gives us the best chance to make a project successful.
Because I think there's some other concessions and other discussions that can be had in this basic density bonus agreement that will be
correct
to the benefit of both the city and the
developer. If I'm correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the density bonus with the condition will be recorded onto the property, so it's something that is going to be sustaining and not just something that's going to be basically negotiated and forgotten about. So.
Okay, the other one is that, we've been also waiting for, I know Ali completed it some time back, but the NEMU update for the zoning, when do we expect to see that? We were expecting to see it at the end of this month or in this month.
It's on calendar to be presented before you, I think within the next
July.
couple meetings. Yeah.
And the reason why we've been delayed in this?
They wanted to wait for me to come on board.
Such a rock star. Such a rock star. They had to wait for the rock star. Okay, good. All right. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Meeting is adjourned, and we will adjourn the meeting in honor of Alex Maldonado, who is a former LULAC section director. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beatrice, thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you, Commissioner.